Driven.
Hello everyone, this is Data Driven Chat, and today I'm very pleased to have Ronny Schueritz and Robin Hirt. They are founders of prenode, very exciting people. They have done a lot of work in machine learning and software engineering, and I'm really excited to have them both on podcast today. Hi Ronny, hi Robin.
Hi there.
Hi Ghana, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So yeah, this is going to be interesting because I know Ronny for quite a few years, probably 3 or 4 years, is it now? Something like that, I think. I think we met.
I can't remember. I think we met like four years ago.
Yeah,
something like that. I think it was back in Warwick.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. We met at Warwick University, and I think this is the first time I met Robin. So, so we will have an interesting conversation.
It will be exciting.
Definitely. So just to kick off our discussion, can each of you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? So how did you become interested in machine learning and software engineering? So what was your journey towards what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I will start with that. So I was interested in computers and software engineering quite early, and I started to work as a self-taught freelance developer actually when I was quite young. I was 16, and I was always interested in creating things with software. I really like that it's so accessible and that it can change things in the real world actually. And during my studies then I focused more on optimization methods that are nature inspired. So things that, or algorithms that learn from experience somehow, that led me quickly to machine learning. And what's interesting for me in that perspective is not like needing or not being required to actually explicitly program algorithms to do things, to classify things, but actually to make them to learn on their own. And that's what drives me, and it was interesting for me. And also then seeing how that is applied in the real world. That's like what drives me in that perspective.
Okay, great. So this was Robin and Ronny. How about you?
My journey to machine learning was quite different than Robin's. That's mainly because I don't have such a technical background than he has. So I originally studied business management, actually at Leeds University. And I joined IBM to work as a consultant for quite some time. Did all kinds of projects, M&A, innovation projects, very much focused on transformation and business model transformation. And I really wanted to get deeper into that area of business models and how do we transform business models to become a service business model and all of that. So I joined KIT, the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, to pursue a PhD on. And I originally thought I would, do something with business model innovation, but I was always very much interested in technology. That's why I also worked at IBM. And so I thought, I want to look into how business models change because of technology. And when I looked at the technology stack back then, and I'm now talking 5-6 years ago, or 7 years ago even, I thought, data and analytics, back then everyone talked about machine learning. It wasn't referred to as artificial intelligence or so on like it is nowadays. And I thought that's kind of one of the big trends there, and it will really impact businesses out there. So that's how I got into that, and I started to look into how business models change because of analytics, because of the possibility it brings, and what kind of new services are possible, and how do companies need to change. And that's kind of my journey. So really from a different perspective, but still, ended up in machine learning.
Awesome. So a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, they are aspiring software engineers or data scientists. So I just want to say that, well, what we can see here is a team of 2 people coming from completely different backgrounds, and yet, you guys work together. So can you tell us a little bit more how you met and why did you decide to work together? Because obviously you came from 2 completely different backgrounds.
Yeah. So like
That's
when I
Robin
started,
again. Robin.
yeah. So when I started my PhD in applied machine learning at the IBM KIT Institute, I was very much focusing on the technical aspect. So I had all these ideas on algorithms and focusing on enhancements of performance and stuff like that. And then I met this other PhD student, Ronny, who focused on the business impact of all that. So bringing this other perspective into this world of machine learning, world of AI, and that really like sparked my interest. And I think we realized quite early on, quite quickly, that we have very good chemistry in working with each other. Maybe because we have this complementary skill set and also like the complementary like view on the world that is yeah, we both really much have a lot of advantages out of that. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, we had pretty good chemistry from right from the start, and like Robin said, the and also actually, like you said, it's very complementary. You need a lot of different perspectives to really get machine learning into businesses and get the value out of it. So we saw a lot of value in collaborating.
Yeah, so I interviewed several data scientists so far, and the majority of them are saying, "Oh, you need not only technical skills, but you also need to communicate with business and to being able to translate, you know, problems from business setting into into data science, machine learning, software engineering setting." So I guess I can see why it works. So it's awesome. Looking, I know that normally the most exciting and the best thing is something that you are doing now and you're doing in the future for the majority of people. But if I ask you to pick something from your career that you're particularly proud of, something that you have achieved, and it doesn't have to be the same for both of you, obviously. So what would you pick? What would it be? What are you particularly proud of? Robin?
Yeah, so I think it's quite early because we're very young to have like something that is really impactful. But if you would ask me, for me, it would be the things that like we did or what I did in research that not only focuses on this technical perspective on things, but my PhD I focus very much on the interorganizational aspect of machine learning. So to actually use technical enhancements to use organizational problems also in the domain of service science. And I think that is something that, at least for me, has quite high importance and lays a foundation for what we do now, or what I do now, in terms of our startup that like uses a lot of these things now. So that is something where I'm really much happy that I had that experience. Also to work with a lot of very highly skilled people. That's something that I look back to like with a lot of happy memories.
Awesome. Ronny?
Yeah, I agree with Robin. It's we are quite early in our career, so but still, yeah. And I also think during my PhD research, that's probably some of the things that happened in that time, and some of the things that we came up with. I'm particularly proud of, and were also very important for my development, because when I looked into business model innovation, how machine learning can drive changes in the business model, I got to the point where I believe, sure, machine learning brings in a lot of new business models, but there's so much potential for existing businesses to enrich their products and services with all kinds of AI-based features, experiences, and new services. So really enriching the existing product portfolio. So I started to look into how can we design products and new features that are AI-based and that use machine learning. And I was very lucky to collaborate with some very highly skilled people Barbara Wixom, which is also a dear friend of mine. She's at MIT, and we collaborated now for over 3 years on some of that research that we put together, and trying to really show organizations how they can use machine learning to enrich their existing products. All the work that we've done here, I strongly believe that it really helped organizations, and it's still helping organizations. And I also believe that I'm still drawing to today from these insights that we gathered.
Yeah, I can also recommend the listeners to check out your papers. I mean, some of them are really exciting. So I know that you co-wrote several papers together, yeah, I particularly like the fact how you kind of always describe how how can you formulate KPIs in the from the business perspective that would resonate with some of the machine learning and software engineering goals. So that's amazing, because that's not something that you would see very often. I think normally people focus on either the technical side or the business modeling side, but it's very rare when you actually can read both. So I will under this video will give some links to my favorite papers, but I will also ask Ronny and Robin to provide to provide some recommendations when I post the podcast. So you are currently working on this really exciting field, federated or collaborative learning techniques. So can you tell the listeners, I'm not sure many of them would be familiar with federated learning, but I was wondering if you could basically, in a nutshell, summarize what it is and tell us what the main advantages are, and perhaps if you can think of any drawbacks of the technique. So Robin, do you want to start again?
Yeah, for sure. So we were coming from this perspective, as we already explained, from using machine learning in practice. And in machine learning, as you know, data is kind of key. Like, data is the thing that fuels machine learning and helps to solve one specific task for classification or regression. And I think what most data scientists kind of experience in reality, that data is often not that accessible, that many organizations are involved, or you have to somehow gather your data, centralize it in order to actually create machine learning models that work well. And here, like, the technology of federated learning helps quite well, and it helps you to build machine learning models or individual machine learning models on these different distributed scattered data sources for one specific task. And these individual separate models can then be fused, centralized, and then fused together and redistributed. So we have a paradigm shift from basically not centralizing the data, bring the data to the algorithm, but actually bring the algorithm to the data. So the basic principle is to use neural networks or machine learning models, black box models, as a means of information exchange or data exchange that prohibits to have this sensitive data being exposed. Yeah, that is federated learning in a nutshell. And there are a lot of variations on how to specifically implement systems that do that. And like, one of the drawbacks is most certainly with every distributed system, it's complexity. So the infrastructure that you have to set up in order to realize federated learning systems is quite hard to do that in this setting. And there are many other problems that come along, such as securing the models themselves or optimizing communication infrastructure. But those are all problems that can be solved step by step, that require infrastructure, require platforms, require standard solutions. And I think that's also what drove us to found a company that does exactly that, to overcome those drawbacks of federated learning and make it accessible for a broad audience.
Yeah, because when you think about that, if you think about, you can now train machine learning models in a decentralized manner. what actually brings that to product and service innovation. If you think about a company that sells a product, it doesn't matter what it is, and this company wants to enrich that product with any kind of feature. That can be a little sales forecast within a software application like an ERP tool, or that can be more complex like a predictive maintenance solution on a complex machinery or heavy equipment. In all of these cases, to actually enrich the product, you need to train a machine learning model. But how do you get the data? So usually product providers, when they sell their products to customers, they need to collect all the customer data to actually have a database to train their models on. Now, not in every case that is possible. In some cases, especially in a B2B context, customers just don't want to share their data. There are different reasons for that. In some cases, they can't share their data because of legal reasons, because the data is sensitive. In some cases, more from a strategic perspective, they don't want to share their data, or they're not allowed to because of contractual reasons, and so on and so on. So there are many different reasons why the user of a product cannot share the data. So in using now federated machine learning as a product provider or service provider, you can actually enrich your offerings with features that are based on machine learning without collecting all your customer data. And that's the huge potential we see in federated learning, and that's why we actually founded Prenode, where we develop a managed federated learning solution. Because just like Robin explained, there's so many drawbacks to the technology in terms of the complexity of the system and the infrastructure that you need to handle somehow. And in order to do that, you need a solution, we believe, and you can't possibly tackle that all on your own. So that's why we developed a managed federated learning solution.
So this sounds really exciting, and so a lot of people, like I said, who are listening to us aspire to a career in software engineering and data science. So as people who already work in federated learning, can you give some tips to those who want to get into the field? So what is the most important thing to remember, and where do they start? How do they learn more about it? How do they get a job in it?
Yeah.
Robin, do you want to just kick off again?
So let me answer that. I think like the most important thing is to get first started with machine learning in general first. So to have a very profound understanding of the basic concepts that apply in machine learning, to being able to know the dangers of when you train machine learning models, of overfitting, of having bias in data. All these things, they still apply in federated machine learning. And with our experience, they somehow get even more complex. And the first thing is to have a very basic and profound understanding in that sense. And luckily, there are a lot of also open source communities that focus on federated machine learning, where you can learn from, such as OpenMind, or also frameworks or technology from Google that helps to get the first steps and to experiment with that technology. I think that would be a first start to gain some knowledge. There is a lot of research actually in federated machine learning. Like there are a lot of papers published, and it's increasing in number. So that's also one thing that can help. And in my opinion, it's always helpful for every new technology, if you want to learn it, to find a problem and to try to solve it with that technology. I think that is one of the best ways in learning to apply something, or to learning something new.
Mm-hmm. So learning by doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Ronny?
Nothing to add to that, but maybe one comment. Even if you know, I'm not I don't have a technical background, but like Robin said, because of all the resources you have online, all these open source communities, but all these also these online courses, you can actually get into it very easily. You shouldn't be afraid of it and just try. And there are a lot of resources that can help you. And not everyone needs to be, the absolutely technical expert in some of the aspects of it, but just getting a found understanding of machine learning is, I think, helpful in all kinds of situations.
Awesome. Yeah. So I have some of my students are executive students, and yeah, this question comes up all the time. Oh, how much of the technical detail should I know? Because I'm responsible for this field in my company, and so I think this perspective that you shouldn't be afraid as long as you understand what the models are doing and how they work, and you have people you can trust, like in your situation, right? It's still possible to make an impact in this industry, which is incredibly exciting. So you touched on this. I think Robin touched on this on the potential of federated learning in terms of making ethical, explainable AI. Yeah, I personally work a lot in responsible personalization. So I just wanted, kind of as a vested interest, to ask you a question about what is the potential for federated learning to revolutionize personalization techniques, especially considering that it can make things more ethical. Ronny, do you take that?
Yeah, it's actually a tricky one because there are different aspects to it. And Robin, you might be able to get deeper into the explainability of it. But just in terms of personalization itself, I think machine learning itself has the potential to really drive a more personal experience to the use of services, because it's just more nuanced instead of simple rule-based segmentations of customers. But when it comes to when it really comes to AI-based features, and you want to use a federated machine learning to drive new AI-based features and products, then all of a sudden it gets a little bit tricky, because when you use federated learning in its kind of pure form, like Google has introduced it, for example, you generate one optimized model, one model that kind of represents a global optimum. And that's the complete opposite of a personalization, right? I mean, that's not a personal model. And that's why we use different kinds of techniques that actually drive a more personalization to federated learning. And that means we use federated learning to generate global models. Mm-hmm. We then personalize these models to each individual entity or each individual user. And that really helps to that every user gets a personalized model and gets a more personalized experience. And that's especially important in B2B, in a B2B context, where not every customer is the same. They're very different.
Robin, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, like I think that is I can agree with Ronny here in full. I think federated machine learning has a huge potential here. If we are like living in Europe, in Germany, and we have very high like laws that prevents from accessing personal information, for instance. So if you are an app provider, actually you don't have it that easy to personalize your apps or to create or enhance your software with features that use or leverage machine learning. I think this paradigm, it really is the next step that we need to take in order to also to ensure like a good product, to have this product that is personalized, but also to like don't take away the data privacy from the consumer. And then that is a very crucial point that we need to take, not only in Europe, but also in other countries as well, that we think is very federated machine learning is predestined for that. It's built for that.
Yeah, of course. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right in the sense that, not only in Europe we have GDPR. Actually, UK managed to get on that train before we had Brexit. But yeah, I think the very similar laws we have in the United States. For example, California has very strict, laws with regard to privacy of personal data, and yeah, this technique has really fantastic potential. Okay, so we come to the most obvious question of the interview, and we cannot avoid talking about coronavirus. So what I want to ask you in terms of, federated learning's impact on solving the current crisis, do you think federated learning can make a significant impact here? Should it? and do you see any particular applications? Because you talked about how it solves the problem with data availability, and there are so many gaps in COVID situation. We don't know a lot of things, and the models that currently built, I think most models that we see is just how many people are ill and how many people died. So those types of things, but there is so much that we need to take into consideration, right? And that's probably something that we need to be thinking about. I don't know who wants to take that question. Robin, do you want to start?
I think Ronny will add to that. So I think what we're seeing in our network, but globally, like a huge movement in the machine learning community, data science community, to create solutions for detecting coronavirus based on X and Y, and that's great. I think that is something that we need at some point. Right now, there's a lot of very useful applications on traditional or so-called traditional methods like optimization or operations research that has a very high value right now, like in this immediate case. But if you ask me like how federated learning could help, I would say in the long term, it would help to collaborate actually. So we have we have a global problem, and we have a lot of organizations that collect data. We have a lot of organizations that have efforts to creating predictive models for this and that. But the issue is that they might not be able to share their data. And then this is something where in the midterm, I think that federated machine learning can help to have this targeted, like focused on one task or one machine learning task, this collaboration between these organizations across organization borders, but also country borders. And that is a huge potential that could help in the long run with COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Ronny, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I completely agree with Robin, and the really important thing that Robin, I think, said, it's that federated learning can help in the midterm or in the long term, because federated machine learning is not yet mainstream. It's quite in very innovative technology that it's just, we're just learning to work with, and we're trying to bring into the market. So at this point, I think we believe, and I think I can talk for both of us, that right now it wouldn't be the right thing to trying to tackle COVID-19 with federated learning, but actually leaving that to the experts and trying to solve that issue. Yeah.
Yeah, so to me, I just want to kind of go a little bit, maybe a little bit deeper here and ask you about this. So, like, to me, I think, COVID-19 is basically an accelerator. So we've been talking about how AI and machine learning will change the future of work and all these things. But we thought that we had about 10, maybe 20 years, right, to do that. But now we realize, okay, well, I can give you a very specific example. We have, I don't know, waiters and waitresses who depend on, income today. And I think what COVID-19 did is basically said, okay, we need to make this automation changes, machine learning changes faster. So in fact, I think the field where you both are working, actually has so much potential to shift the conversation, into, okay, what are the current practical tools in machine learning that we can already use, and how can we make things quicker, right? Because we need to make it quicker. We need to retrain people quicker from certain occupations that we know will not survive industrial revolution for zero. So do you feel that, so if from kind of being in Germany, do you feel any of this kind of, are these the conversations that you hear much, or is it still kind of people are still in shock, kind of waiting what's going to happen after, after we get out of this quarantine?
There's this running joke, and I think you probably have seen it yourself, and it's this question on LinkedIn or on other social networks: is who is driving your digital transformation? Is it your CEO? Is it your CIO? Or is it COVID-19? And I think that's really happening. I mean, we can see it with partners or customers and other companies, that COVID is really driving digital transformation, because all of a sudden people need to work from home, and that's something they're just not used to. Not every company is able to just send all their people home to work from home. They don't have the infrastructure that will actually allow us to do that. So yeah, in that sense, I really think that this current crisis is driving bringing pressure to the industry to digitalize and bringing automation.
Robin, is there anything you want to add?
I think I can completely agree with Ronny here. Like, one thing that from a machine learning perspective maybe is that we now have a huge challenge in front of us. As for machine learning, we predicted market demands, we predicted sales and all these things. And in this world now where we see a complete change of patterns in every area of our lives, we see that the models don't hold true now. So that is something that is quite interesting and a new challenge, and that we have to face now. And I think it also drives us in a direction of making sure that models detect changes like this to make models more robust, or at least being able to know when it doesn't apply anymore. That's maybe a chance that we can take now. We have to take now, actually.
So yeah, thank you for sharing this, and yeah, so definitely I will definitely be thinking more about federated learning and all that. So we came to the last question in the interview, and this is normally the question that a lot of people I talk to have a problem with, because it has a very specific restriction. So the question is, if you had to pick one book and one film that I would ask you to recommend, what would this, this book and film be? And normally people don't like it because they say, oh, obviously I can think of a number of books and a number of films, but you do have this restriction, so you can just pick one each. So, but if you could give us your recommendations, that would be awesome. I don't know who wants to start. Robin,
yeah, I can go.
Okay.
Oh, Robin,
Ronny,
yeah, go ahead, Robin.
Ronny, please, yeah.
Okay. Well, I agree. It's probably the toughest question. So I'll choose for the book. I'll choose The Power of Habit from Charles Duhigg, and I think many of you probably know it already, but I think it gives you some takeaways that you can use. And it really doesn't matter what you do. If you're a data scientist, if you're a manager, doesn't matter what occupation you have, I think you can take something away from that. And when it comes to movies, it's a little bit more difficult. I love movies. I watch a lot of movies. So I chose a movie that is a little bit, it's still famous, but not so famous. It's called Into the Wild. Mm-hmm. It's a very slow-paced movie it's a young college student who just graduated from college and decides to live in the forest. So quite a slow-paced movie.
Okay, thank you very much.
Robin,
how about you?
That's a really hard question. So for a movie, I would say Hidden Figures is something that I really liked because it also shows like one of the problems we still see is that the impact of women and women in tech or in mathematics that is still underrated and not seen as it should be. That is a movie I quite enjoyed in that perspective. And from a book, I would really recommend Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. And it's about the impact of really highly unpredictable events and how we perceive them and how we act on them. And that's something that really changed my view. And that every year there's a new event that is interesting to have read in this book. So this is something I recommend.
Well, thank you both so much, Ronny, Robin. Thanks a lot for doing this podcast today. I'm sure a lot of people will be excited about it, and thank you for finding the time. I know it's tough to find the time now with all the online meetings and all the pressures that we have, but it was such a pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for us as well. Thank you.